Hey there, welcome back. Tonight, we're stepping quietly into the dim, gaslit world of the Victorian era, a time when medicine sat somewhere between science and superstition, between candlelit hope and the cold reality of what people did to survive. In these years, doctors carried leather bags filled with mercury, arsenic, laudanum, leeches, and ideas that hovered halfway between guesswork and ritual. People believed that sickness drifted through foul air, that the body could be balanced through bloodletting, and that a gentle swallow of poison might restore color to the cheeks. Strange cures, chilling comforts, and the uneasy beauty of a society still learning how fragile a human life could be. By watching this video, you'll discover how Victorian healers tried to mend the weary, soothe the dying, calm the anxious, and fight back against a world where pain had no clear cause and no certain cure. Before we begin, a small note. If you enjoy these calm journeys through history, I upload new videos every day, so consider subscribing and turning on the bell. And tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? I love imagining people drifting off to the same story under different skies. Now, let's step into the quiet heart of Victorian medicine. You move through a London street wrapped in a pale, pearly fog that clings to every surface. Gas lamps glow like orbs suspended in milk, their light trembling on wet cobblestones. The cold night carries a mix of scents: coal smoke, damp wool, horse sweat, and the faint sweetness of spilled tonic from an apothecary door left ajar. Every few seconds, a carriage rattles past, wheels striking loose stones with tired rhythm. In the shadows, the century seems to breathe, each exhale a haze of soot and life. Victorian medicine lived inside this fog. It was shaped by crowded cities, distant villages, industrial smoke, and quiet fears whispered through wooden-paneled rooms. Physicians walked with brisk confidence, but their knowledge was half-formed, like silhouettes seen through mist. They wore tall hats, heavy coats, and carried tools that gleamed faintly under gaslight: bone saws, glass bottles, steel needles, and polished stethoscopes that reflected trembling candle flames. Every object felt both hopeful and unsettling. You follow a doctor through a narrow alley where water drips from balconies above, their iron rails cold with dew. He enters a home where a child coughs in the corner, a cloth pressed to her lips. The mother watches anxiously, hands trembling from exhaustion. The doctor kneels beside the girl, listens to her lungs, and nods gravely. No one knows about bacteria, or viruses, or microscopic life. They only know that the air feels wrong, thick, damp, carrying sickness like a ghost that slips through walls. He opens his bag. Inside are powders wrapped in paper, a dark bottle of laudanum with a trembling meniscus, and several small jars containing leeches that cling to the glass like slow-moving shadows. He chooses a tonic and explains that it will ease the cough. It smells faintly of opium and alcohol, sweet but heavy, like medicine meant more for soothing fear than curing illness. The mother's eyes glisten with gratitude, even though neither of them truly knows whether it will help. Outside again, the fog curls around your ankles, carrying the faint metallic smell of the river. Chimneys release slow plumes that drift into a low cloud hovering above the city. Somewhere far off, a whistle blows, a train departing, its steam sighing like a tired giant. Victorian nights were full of these small mechanical murmurings, gears turning, pipes rattling, the quiet pulse of an industrial age trying to understand its own body. Further down the street stands an apothecary, a warm oasis of amber light behind smudged windows. You step inside. Shelves stretch from floor to ceiling, holding bottles of every size, tall cylinders filled with violet liquids, squat jars of herbal mixtures, dusty pots of ointments. Ground bark, camphor, peppermint, sulfur, lavender, and strange powders from faraway colonies mingle into a fragrance that feels both comforting and unsettling. The apothecary measures ingredients with brass scales, their pans rising and falling like patient breaths. People come seeking relief for headaches, melancholy, weak lungs, sleepless nights, troubled digestion, pale skin, trembling nerves. Many cures contain substances you now recognize as dangerous: arsenic to brighten the complexion, mercury to drive out impurities, opium to quiet a restless mind. Yet each treatment is offered with gentle reassurance, because in an age without certainty, hope itself becomes medicine. You step back into the street and make your way toward a hospital, a looming building of soot-darkened bricks, its windows glowing faintly like watchful eyes. Inside, the air is cool and damp, carrying the soft echo of footsteps along long corridors. Iron-framed beds line the wards, each one draped with white linens that gently sway as nurses move between them. The sound of breathing fills the room, dozens of sleepers, coughing, whispering, or drifting in and out of fever dreams. A surgeon stands beneath a skylight, washing his hands in cold water. He sharpens a blade on a whetstone, the rasp soft but steady. In these decades, surgery exists somewhere between bravery and terror, a battlefield fought with bare hands, limited knowledge, and a deep belief that relief is worth the risk. Chloroform is new. Antiseptic ideas have not yet taken root. Yet each surgeon carries a stern tenderness, a desire to ease suffering with the tools they have, not the tools they wish for. As you wander deeper into the ward, you feel the soft warmth of lanterns resting atop wooden stands. Their light settles gently on sleeping faces, casting long shadows across blankets and floors. Nurses whisper instructions to one another, their voices steady and low. Cloth cools foreheads. Spoonfuls of broth are lifted with careful hands. In these moments, Victorian medicine feels almost timeless, a mixture of guesswork, compassion, ritual, and quiet endurance. Outside, dawn begins to soften the sky. Pale light drifts down through the fog, touching rooftops and the slow-moving river. You take a deep breath, letting the centuries settle around you like a heavy wool coat. The world feels older, slower, filled with contradictions. Danger and tenderness, ignorance and curiosity, fear and fragile hope. Here in this threshold between night and morning, you begin to understand the Victorian desire to cure the human body using whatever tools their age allowed. Strange methods, unsettling treatments, and beliefs built from shadows, all stitched together by people trying, in their own imperfect way, to keep one another alive. The fog thins, the lamps dim, the city exhales. Part 2. The Age of Miasma. When smell was the enemy, the night dissolves into a pale gray morning, and you find yourself standing at the edge of a Victorian street that slowly begins to stir. Carriages creak to life, horses stomp in the damp air, and the city seems to unfurl like a heavy curtain being pulled back. A thin layer of fog clings to rooftops, drifting lazily between chimneys, as if the whole world is wrapped in a soft, breathless veil. This is the landscape where one idea held medicine in its grip: the belief that smell, more than anything else, carried disease. In the Victorian imagination, illness drifted through the air like a shadow. People feared the scent of rotting vegetables, open sewers, stagnant riverbanks, coal smoke, and the warm sourness of crowded rooms. They called this invisible threat miasma, a foul vapor rising from decay. When a neighborhood smelled bad, it was considered dangerous. When it smelled clean, it felt safe. The entire century built its medical world around this quiet misunderstanding. You walk down a narrow London lane where the scent of damp brick mingles with the sharp tang of industrial smoke. Dust from coal settles on windowsills like fine black frost. The smell of horses drifts from stables, warm and earthy, mixing with the metallic odor of iron railings and worn carriage wheels. Every breath carries a different note: sweetness, rot, soot, damp wool. Victorians inhaled the world as if it were a map of their health. A shopkeeper sweeps his doorstep, scattering last night's soot into tiny clouds that rise and hang in the air. He glances nervously at a nearby alley where a drain overflows, releasing a sour odor that twists upward in the morning light. He mutters something about bad air and steps back inside. To him, the smell feels like sickness waiting to happen, a silent creature moving through the world. Further along, you reach the Thames. Its water is thick, dark, and strangely quiet, drifting around the timbers of old piers. The river smells of algae, waste, and distant factories. People avoid walking too close, especially in summer, when heat thickens the air and turns the river into a slow-moving haze. Victorian doctors warn their patients, "Stay away, the air is dangerous." They believe cholera floats on the surface like an invisible mist, ready to slip into lungs and hearts. You pause at a bridge and let your hand rest on the cold stone railing. Beneath you, the river exhales a damp, earthy smell that clings to your clothes. Carriages roll behind you, their wheels echoing softly between the arches. A woman hurries past, pressing a handkerchief to her nose, perfumed with lavender, rosewater, or vinegar, anything to create a barrier of scent. Some carry sponges soaked in camphor. Others hold small vials of smelling salts. A few wealthy families burn incense indoors, believing the fragrant smoke will chase away death. The belief in miasma shapes how people clean their homes. You enter a modest drawing room where morning sunlight glows through gauzy curtains. The air smells of freshly scrubbed wood, carbolic soap, and the mineral scent of boiled water. Housewives open windows even in cold weather, letting wind cut through rooms like a living broom. They dust high shelves, sweep floors, and hang linens outside to catch the sun. Cleanliness becomes not just a practice, but a kind of spiritual protection. Doctors echo the same advice in their visits: ventilate, refresh, purify. They tell families to burn herbs, scatter chloride of lime, wash walls with vinegar, empty chamber pots more often. The sound of scrubbing brushes and clinking basins becomes part of daily life. Sometimes the effort is comforting. Other times, it feels like waging war against an enemy everyone can smell, but no one can see. You walk through a crowded district where tenements rise like dark cliffs above narrow courtyards. Laundry sags between windows. Children sit on stoops eating bread. The air feels enclosed, thick with steam from kitchens, smoke from chimneys, sweat from crowded rooms. People glance at the sky, hoping for wind to sweep through and carry the heaviness away. When cholera strikes here, many blame the smells that gather in corners and stairwells, believing that sickness rises from the very stones. In the heart of the neighborhood stands a small clinic. You step inside. The hallway smells of chalk dust, ink, and something faintly medicinal, perhaps camphor, perhaps spirits. A physician speaks softly to a patient, explaining that her recent illness likely came from the vitiated air in her home. He recommends ventilation, fresh herbs, and perhaps a change in location. The woman listens with a weary nod. She doesn't question the belief. It's easier to accept than the frightening truth the world has not yet discovered. Outside again, you follow a street that slopes downward toward a public bathhouse. Steam escapes through tiny cracks in the windows, carrying a warm scent of soap and mineral water. Bathhouses are seen as sanctuaries, places where clean air and warmth restore health. People sit in quiet pools, letting heat loosen their joints and worries. They breathe deeply, believing the purified steam enters the body like a blessing. Not far from here, wealthy families take the idea further. You peek inside a grand townhouse where servants open floor-length windows to let the morning breeze sweep through. The household smells of beeswax, polished wood, linen, and the delicate floral scent of imported soaps. A physician has recommended frequent airings to protect the family. Curtains billow in the wind. Dust floats like golden pollen. A quiet confidence fills the space. If the air is clean, everything feels safe. Yet beyond the comfort of cleanliness lies a deeper truth, a quiet fear that no one dares to confront. The miasma theory becomes a way to explain what people don't understand. When epidemics sweep through cities, the air feels heavy with dread. When illness strikes suddenly, people blame the smell, the dampness, the fog, anything that seems to float through the world without shape or warning. You stand in a garden as twilight settles. The damp grass releases a cool scent, earthy and comforting. A lantern glows on a wooden bench, casting a gentle circle of light. In moments like this, the Victorian world feels tender, shaped by people who try to understand nature with the senses they trust most. As the evening deepens, the air shifts again. A soft chill moves across your skin. Lamps flicker in windows. The city hums with quiet life. And in this fading light, you begin to feel how deeply the Victorian mind believed in miasma, how the nose became a medical tool, how air itself became a character in the great story of health and illness. The day ends softly. The night returns. Part 3, Leeches, Bloodletting, and the Worship of Balance. Morning drifts slowly across the city as you step away from the noise of London S streets and walk toward a quieter quarter where physicians keep their rooms above bookshops and bakeries. The air smells of warm bread, damp stone, and the faint mineral tang of early rain. A carriage splashes through a puddle, sending ripples across the street. Everything feels still, as if the world is holding its breath. This is where one of humanity's oldest medical beliefs continued to thrive, the idea that suffering could be eased by releasing blood. For centuries, Europe trusted a simple conviction: illness came from imbalance. Too much heat, too much cold, too much moisture, too much dryness. Physicians saw the body as a vessel of humors, subtle fluids that drifted and mingled like weather patterns inside the human frame. The Victorian era, though filled with steam engines and telegraphs, still clung to these older echoes. People believed that pain rose from excess, and so they bled. You enter a physician's consulting room, where the morning light is filtered through lace curtains, giving the space a soft, diffused glow. Shelves hold glass jars, leather-bound volumes, and small boxes containing instruments. On a wooden table lies a neat arrangement of tools: a slender lancet with a polished handle, a ceramic basin with curved edges, a cloth folded with precision. Next to them rests a cylindrical jar filled with dark shapes, gently sliding across the glass, leeches suspended like living shadows. A patient sits in a wooden chair, hands resting on his knees. His complexion is pale, his breath shallow, his eyes rimmed with fatigue. He complains of heaviness in the limbs, perhaps a pressure in the head, perhaps a gnawing anxiety he cannot name. The doctor listens carefully, nodding. To him, and to many Victorians, these symptoms suggest an excess of blood, a congestion of vitality that presses against the fragile machinery of the body. The physician reaches for the jar. Inside, the leeches drift in slow spirals, their bodies sleek and cool, their movements rhythmic and deliberate. When he removes the lid, a moist, earthy scent fills the air. He selects one gently, holding it between his fingers. The creature twists lightly, sensing warmth. He places it on the patient's skin, usually the neck, sometimes the temples, sometimes the inside of the arm. The leech searches for a moment, then attaches with silent certainty, its small mouth creating a faint pressure, as it begins to draw. There is no pain, only a dull tugging sensation, like fabric being pulled by a soft, steady hand. The patient exhales slowly. The doctor watches the leech swell with dark fluid, its body shifting from slender to plump. It becomes warm to the touch, as if absorbing the very heat of the body. In Victorian rooms like this, the act feels almost ritualistic, deliberate, quiet, and strangely intimate. Both physician and patient carry the belief that relief lives in the release. You step back and sense the atmosphere of the room, the faint drip of rain against the window, the ticking of a small brass clock, the warm whisper of fabric as the patient adjusts in the chair. Every sound is gentle, softened by the weight of expectation. The process lasts until the leech lets go on its own, satiated, leaving behind a slow bead of blood that the physician cleans carefully. A bandage is placed with practiced tenderness. In other homes, the practice unfolds differently. You enter a narrow townhouse where a mother bleeds her son using a small household kit bought from an apothecary. Families often performed their own bleeding sessions when professional help was too expensive. She unfolds a cloth on the table, prepares a basin, and uses a spring-loaded scarificator, a small brass device with blades hidden inside. With a quick click, the blades create shallow incisions, releasing dark streaks of blood that trickle into the basin below. The room smells of iron and damp linen. She believes she is saving him from fever, dizziness, or moral weakness. Beyond individual homes and clinics, the practice takes on a larger scale inside hospitals and infirmaries. You walk through a ward where dozens of beds line the walls, each occupied by patients weakened by different ailments. The scent here is heavier, a mix of carbolic soap, sweat, wool blankets, damp wood, and the metallic undertone of bleeding basins. Nurses move quietly, setting down jars of leeches, carrying folded linens, opening shutters to let pale light fall onto the beds. They work with calm efficiency, their footsteps soft on the worn floors. In one corner, a physician performs cupping, another ancient method meant to redirect or draw out humors. He places warm cups on a patient's back, the glass fogging slightly as the skin beneath reddens and rises. Some cups are heated, others are used with a gentle incision beforehand to allow for wet cupping, a method believed to strengthen the body by letting troublesome fluids escape. The patient lies still, breathing slowly as the cups cling to his skin like quiet, transparent lanterns. The ritual of bloodletting has a rhythm. It is slow, careful, deliberate. It carries a certain reverence, as if people are trying to negotiate with the invisible forces inside their own bodies. Many Victorians describe feeling lighter afterward, calmer, as though some tension has flowed away with the blood. These sensations reinforce the belief, weaving a cycle of trust between doctor and patient. Outside, the rain deepens. The city darkens under a soft gray sky. In the homes of the wealthy, where fires crackle in marble hearths and carpets soften the steps of servants, bleeding sessions occur in elegant drawing rooms. A patient reclines on a chaise longue draped with velvet. The physician works by lamplight, his movements slow and precise. Afterward, tea is served, scented with bergamot. Curtains sway gently as the windows are cracked open to let fresh air restore balance to the room. Meanwhile, in poorer districts, the experience is more rugged. You step into a cramped room where a laborer sits on a wooden stool while a local practitioner applies leeches purchased from a street vendor. The air smells of soot, wet clothing, and boiled potatoes. The man winces as the leeches latch on, but he holds still. He cannot afford to rest long. He must return to work. Yet he trusts the process, because everyone he knows has been bled at some point. For headaches, for weakness, for fevers, for worries that feel too heavy to carry alone. Even amid these scenes, whispers of doubt begin to stir. Some physicians notice that patients become faint or sick after losing too much blood. Others argue among themselves about when the practice helps and when it harms. Yet tradition runs deep, and belief carries a soothing simplicity. When a body feels burdened, people release something. When life feels stuck, they let something go. In a world with few answers, this ritual becomes a way to act, to feel in control, to take part in the slow fight against suffering. As the day unfolds, the rain softens into mist. Lamps glow through the haze. Streets glisten with pale reflections. People move quietly between homes, shops, and clinics, carrying with them the confidence that balance can be restored by guiding the body, mysterious internal tides. And as the evening settles in, you begin to understand why this practice lasted so long, not because it was effective, but because it felt deeply human, a gesture toward harmony, an attempt to soothe the unseen storms that lie beneath the surface of the skin. Part 4. Arsenic, mercury, opium, the poisons people called medicine. A soft evening settles over the city, laying a muted glow upon the stone facades and narrow alleyways. Lamps tremble awake one by one, their warm halos stretching across the slick cobblestones. The air smells faintly of rain and coal smoke, with a thin thread of lavender drifting from an open window above. This quiet hour feels gentle, yet beneath it lies a truth that shaped Victorian medicine. Some of the most dangerous substances ever known were once trusted as cures. You begin on a quiet residential street where an apothecary's lamp flickers behind wavy glass panes. Inside, rows of bottles glow like tiny stained glass windows, emerald, amber, violet, cobalt. Each bottle holds a promise. Each one also holds a risk. Victorian families step inside with hope in their eyes, believing that relief waits somewhere between those narrow wooden shelves. The air carries the scent of dried herbs, mineral dust, alcohol, and a sweetness layered with something metallic. Behind the counter, an apothecary grinds a mixture with a pestle. The rhythm is steady, like a soft heartbeat, echoing beneath the room's wooden beams. He adds a pinch of powdered arsenic, a substance that glimmers like crushed porcelain. In small doses, he believes it restores pale complexions, strengthens weak stomachs, and sharpens the mind. Women buy arsenic wafers to brighten their skin, seeking a glow they call healthful pallor. Men take arsenic tonics before long walks or difficult days, trusting they will feel lighter, more alive. You watch a young woman approach the counter. Her hands tremble slightly as she explains her troubles: exhaustion, faintness, a sense of melancholy that gathers in her chest like fog. The apothecary nods, selecting a pale, chalky tablet infused with arsenic. He speaks softly, reassuring her that it brings clarity and energy. She pays without hesitation. To her, the world offers few remedies. Trust becomes a kind of medicine in itself. As you leave the shop, the street feels colder. The scent of wet stone rises from the pavement. A carriage passes, its wheels clicking steadily as it turns the corner. In the distance, a vendor calls out to evening shoppers, while lanterns sway gently above the marketplace. Everything appears calm, unaware of the invisible dangers carried in pockets and purses. Farther along, you enter a townhouse where a mother prepares a mercury-based ointment for her child's rash. The room smells of tallow candles, warm blankets, and the soft medicinal sharpness of the ointment. Mercury glints like liquid silver when warmed. She dips her fingers into the mixture, spreading the cool cream across her son's irritated skin. Victorian mothers trust these salves the way later generations trust antiseptics. They do not see the risk, only the immediate comfort it brings as the child sighs quietly and leans into her hands. On a nearby table sits a small bottle labeled Blue Mass, mercury pills taken for headaches, stomach troubles, melancholy, and even moral ailments. The pills leave a metallic aftertaste, one that Victorians describe as strangely reassuring. Doctors prescribe them as confidently as they prescribe rest or clean air. Some patients take them daily, believing they bring balance to the body. You move through the house as the family settles into the evening. A servant lights a fire, releasing a warmth that mixes with the mineral scent of mercury and the gentle perfume of rose water. In the parlor, a father swallows a small dose of calomel, another mercury compound, to ease his digestive discomfort. The bitterness lingers on his tongue, but he closes his eyes, trusting the familiar routine. In this age, the line between cure and poison is thin, blurred by hope and habit. Later, you step into an opium shop hidden beneath a row of apartments. The doorway is narrow, its sign worn by years of smoke and dampness. Inside, the room glows with a warm, amber hue. Glass jars filled with laudanum line the counter, some nearly opaque with sediment. The scent is sweet, woody, and heavy, a perfume that softens the edges of the world. Laudanum, a mixture of opium and alcohol, flows through Victorian society like a quiet river. Mothers dip a cloth in it to calm teething children. Laborers sip it after long days to soothe aching limbs. Poets drink it to escape the weight of their thoughts. It is the century's most beloved remedy, a gentle, dark comfort that wraps itself around the mind like warm wool. You watch an elderly man ask for a small vial. He speaks of sharp pains in his joints, of nights spent awake listening to the groans of the wind against his shutters. The apothecary hands him a bottle with a cork stopper. The man thanks him quietly, holds it close, and steps out into the damp street. In that bottle, he carries more than medicine. He carries a sense of peace, a promise of sleep. Further down the market road, another shop sells tonics containing opium blended with spices and sugar. The labels promise vigor, ease, and emotional steadiness. Bright illustrations decorate the bottles, showing women in elegant dresses or children smiling beside flowers. The contrast between the cheerful artwork and the deep, dreaming shadows inside the bottles feels strangely tender, as if the Victorian world is trying to comfort itself through beauty. You walk again through the quiet streets as night deepens. The gas lamps hum softly. A breeze carries the faint smell of chimney smoke, warming the edges of the cold air. Everything feels suspended, calm on the surface, yet full of hidden stories. Families sit inside their homes, sipping tonics that blur their thoughts. Physicians write prescriptions in dimly lit rooms. Apothecaries arrange jars of dangerous remedies with steady hands. And all across the city, people drift towards sleep with the promise of relief resting on their bedside tables. The moon rises over the rooftops, silvering the cobblestones and touching the river with gentle light. A stillness settles across the city. In this hush, the Victorian world reveals itself, hopeful, vulnerable, and trusting in remedies that shimmer between comfort and danger. Part 5. Electricity and the Dream of Mechanical Healing. A pale glimmer spreads across the morning sky, softening the chimneys and rooftops as the city slowly awakens. The air smells faintly of damp brick and warm iron, mixed with the distant whisper of coal smoke rising from early household fires. Carriages drift along the streets like tired animals shaking off sleep. This quiet dawn carries a subtle hum, the promise of a world that has begun to believe that pain, illness, and even sorrow might be soothed with wires, currents, and invisible forces that spark beneath the skin. Electricity is young in the Victorian era, mysterious, almost holy. People see it as a thread linking the body to the natural world, a kind of modern lightning that might restore what illness has taken. Some fear it, others cling to it with hope sharpened by desperation. Doctors, inventors, and ambitious salesmen create devices that glow, buzz, tick, hum, and vibrate. Each one is designed to promise something: strength, vitality, relief. You begin in a small workshop where a physician-inventor adjusts a contraption on his desk. The room smells of oil, varnished wood, and warmed metal. Coils of copper wire lie tangled beside polished brass knobs. A galvanic battery sits on the table, a stack of metal discs separated by cloth soaked in acid. When touched, it tingles like static across the fingers. When connected to wires, it creates a current that Victorians believe can awaken dormant nerves, calm troubled spirits, or jolt vitality back into tired limbs. The physician tests the current by dipping the ends of 2 wires into water. A faint fizz rises to the surface. He nods, satisfied. A patient arrives moments later, a middle-aged man with stiff joints and an aching back. The doctor sits him in a wooden chair and wraps soft, damp cloths around his wrists. He attaches wires to the cloths, explaining in gentle tones that the electric fluid will rebalance the nervous system. The patient closes his eyes. A faint vibration hums through the wires, traveling into his arms like a distant echo of thunder. Victorians describe this sensation as refreshing, almost cleansing. Some say they feel their pain lighten, drifting away like fog caught in a sudden breeze. Others say the current sharpens their senses, quickens their pulse, or fills them with a warm flutter beneath the ribs. The belief is powerful, a promise that the body, like a machine, can be rewired. You walk through the workshop as more inventions crowd the shelves. Galvanic belts meant to charge the abdomen with gentle currents, electrostatic brushes that crackle faintly when dragged across the skin, mechanical massagers shaped like polished wooden hammers, spark generators with tiny points glowing violet when activated. Each device carries a mixture of imagination and hope. The physician believes himself a pioneer, standing at the edge of a future where suffering no longer feels ancient and immovable. Outside, the sky brightens to a quiet silver blue. The smell of wet earth rises from the gardens behind the houses. Birds call softly from narrow ledges. You walk toward a public demonstration hall where electricity attracts curious crowds. Posters flutter in the breeze outside the building, their ink depicting lightning bolts, radiant silhouettes, and promises of renewed vitality through the sacred current of nature. Inside, the hall glows with lanterns hanging from iron hooks. Rows of wooden benches face a small stage where an inventor presents his newest device, an electromagnetic bath. The apparatus consists of a shallow copper basin, a set of wires, and a crank that makes a low, resonant hum. The inventor invites a volunteer to place their hands in the basin filled with warm water. When he turns the crank, tiny currents ripple through the surface, catching the lantern light like flickers of trapped lightning. The volunteer gasps softly. The sensation is strange, but not painful. The audience leans forward, captivated by the idea that illness might be soothed through tiny sparks gliding beneath the skin. The hall smells of warm metal, oiled wood, and the faint sweetness of cologne worn by the wealthier attendees. Some murmur approvingly, others whisper in awe. A few simply want to believe. Later in the day, you find yourself inside a fashionable parlor where a woman sits beside a table with a small battery-operated device. Her physician has recommended gentle electrical stimulation to calm her nervous agitation, a diagnosis that includes sleeplessness, emotional fatigue, and the quiet despair that sometimes settles on long afternoons. She presses 2 metal handles lightly in her hands, feeling a steady pulse move through her palms. The room smells of lavender, beeswax polish, and a hint of warm fabric from the sunlit drapes. The electricity becomes part of the atmosphere, a quiet rhythm accompanying her breath. In lower-class neighborhoods, the devices are simpler but no less valued. You enter a cramped flat where a laborer treats his own aching shoulder with a cheap galvanic ring he bought from a street vendor. The metal feels cold against his skin. When he tightens it, a faint spark jumps beneath the band, startling but oddly comforting. He believes it will ease the stiffness from long hours of lifting crates. His wife watches from the table, sewing quietly beside a lantern that trembles with every draft. The smell of boiling potatoes fills the room. Electricity here feels like a small miracle contained inside a piece of metal. As you continue, the city shifts into late afternoon. Shadows lengthen across the cobblestones, stretching like soft brush strokes beneath the feet of passers-by. A light drizzle begins, carrying the scent of wet leaves and coal smoke. Through the mist, you see advertisements pasted on brick walls. Vital sparks for the weary body, electric harmony for weak limbs, reinvigorate your blood, calm your mind. The posters flutter gently, as if moved by the very force they celebrate. Electricity becomes a symbol, not just of medical hope, but of progress, a sign that the Victorian world is stepping towards something new, something brighter, something governed not by superstition, but by the strange, shimmering logic of nature's hidden energies. Even if the understanding is incomplete, the belief itself brings a quiet comfort. By evening, the rain softens into mist again. You walk past townhouses with warm lights glowing behind lace curtains. In one room, a family gathers around a galvanic battery resting on a velvet-lined table. They pass the handles around like a parlor game, laughing softly at the tingling sensation. The room smells of tea, lemon peel, and damp wool drying by the fire. Electricity, for a moment, becomes both entertainment and remedy, a gentle spark that brightens a darkening world. The night settles fully, laying a hush across the city. Lamps flicker in the fog. The hum of the day fades, leaving only the soft echo of footsteps and the distant murmur of wheels turning along wet streets. The Victorian dream of mechanical healing slips quietly into the darkness, carried forward by faith in unseen forces and the gentle promise of relief woven through every electrical spark. Part 6. Mesmerism and the Sleep of the Magnetic Mind. A soft, violet dusk settles over the city, draping rooftops and chimneys in a gentle, dreamlike haze. The fog thins into delicate strands that drift through lamplight like pale ribbons. A cool breeze carries the scent of wet leaves, smoldering coal, and something faintly floral rising from a nearby garden. In this dim hour, when the world slips into a quieter rhythm, Victorian minds turn toward a different kind of healing, one rooted not in chemicals or metal instruments, but in invisible forces believed to flow through the human body like tides. Mesmerism begins as a whisper in drawing rooms and lecture halls. It grows into a movement, half science, half stage performance, drawing people who crave calm, release, or simply a moment of escape from the pressures of industrial life. Practitioners speak of animal magnetism, a subtle energy that moves between people, influenced by touch, intention, and gaze. Illness, they say, is a disturbance in this flow. Healing comes from guiding it back into harmony. You enter a dim parlor where the curtains are drawn against the evening chill. The air smells of beeswax, rosewater, and the faint mineral coolness of damp stone outside. A woman sits upright in a velvet armchair, hands resting gently on her lap. A mesmerist stands beside her, a tall figure with steady eyes and deliberate movements. He raises his hands slowly, letting his palms hover a few inches from her face. The lantern light softens the outline of his fingers, making them appear almost luminous against the shadows. The mesmerist moves his hands downward in smooth, sweeping motions, as if brushing invisible threads of air. The woman breathes deeply, her eyelids fluttering, her shoulders slacken, her jaw softens. A gentle tranquility spreads across her expression, like frost melting from glass. She speaks in a quiet, drifting voice, answering his soft questions with dreamlike clarity. Around them, the room becomes an island of stillness, as if time itself has paused. Outside, carriages pass along the street, wheels ticking over cobblestones. Their sounds seem distant, muffled by the heavy drapes. The mesmerist continues his motions with rhythmic precision, moving around the chair to adjust the flow of energy. Some Victorians describe this moment as a magnetic sleep, a state between waking and dreaming, where the mind drifts freely and pain loosens its grip. You notice a faint scent of lavender rising from the woman-esque shawl, a detail that feels strangely important, as though the calming fragrance blends with the quiet hum of mesmerism to create an atmosphere of soft surrender. Her breathing deepens, her hands relax. A sense of relief spreads through her posture, subtle but unmistakable. Down the street, in a more modest neighborhood, mesmerism takes on a different form. You step into a cramped flat where a laborer sits at a wooden table lit by a single candle. The flame flickers across the rough surface, casting warm gold across his tired face. A friend stands behind him, gently stroking downward from his shoulders to his elbows. Slow, even motions often recommended in mesmerist pamphlets. The room smells of boiled turnips, damp wool, and the faint smoky note of cheap tallow candles. The laborer closes his eyes. He works long hours in a factory where metal clatters endlessly and dust fills the air. Tonight, the simple, repetitive touch feels like a release, quieting the noise that follows him home each evening. He doesn't know whether the sensation comes from magnetism or simple human closeness. It hardly matters. The relief is real enough. Mesmerism spreads beyond private homes. You enter a lecture hall where seats fill with people eager to witness demonstrations. The room is warm with body heat and lantern glow. The air carries the scent of damp coats, ink, polished wood, and anticipation. On stage, a practitioner invites volunteers to sit in rigid-backed chairs while he places his hands over theirs. When he begins his slow, rhythmic passes, the audience quiets, drawn to the softness of his movements. Some volunteers drift into trance. A few sway gently, lost in the calm. One begins to answer questions in a voice that sounds detached from the weight of everyday life. People murmur with curiosity. Some dismiss it as performance. Others believe entirely, convinced that invisible forces ripple through the human body like wind across grass. Later in the night, you find yourself in a fashionable salon where mesmerism blends with spiritualism. Candles flickering, velvet drapes drawn, the scent of incense curling through the air. A medium sits, with hands folded, claiming to use magnetic sleep to commune with unseen realms. Guests watch with awe, their faces lit by the soft flare of candle flames. Mesmerism here is not only a medical method, but a doorway, a bridge to places the Victorian imagination longs to reach. Yet even in quieter contexts, the practice carries a gentle power. You visit a small clinic where a physician combines mesmerism with conversation. A young man lies on a chaise, eyes half closed, while the doctor moves his hands slowly above the patient's abdomen and chest. He speaks reassuringly, asking the man to breathe deeply, to let his thoughts drift like leaves on a slow-moving river. The patient sighs, tension leaving his shoulders. His mind wanders. The rhythm of touch, breath, and voice creates a sense of safety. Mesmerism becomes a refuge for people overwhelmed by the noise and pace of the industrial age. Women exhausted by domestic responsibilities. Men straining under factory labor. Children haunted by fevers or restless nights. Everyone carries something inside them, a burden that quiets, even briefly, under the mesmerist's steady hands. The belief in magnetic currents satisfies a longing for connection, invisible forces moving between human bodies, shaping health, emotion, and memory. It offers an explanation for feelings without language, for sorrows without cause, for pains that return even when the body appears whole. People trust mesmerism not because they understand it, but because it feels like a balm for the nervous system long before the concept of mental health exists. As the evening deepens, the city falls into a slow, sprawling quiet. Lamps glow faintly behind fogged windows. Footsteps fade. Curtains fall still. Somewhere inside a dim room, a mesmerist's hands trace gentle arcs through the air, guiding another weary mind toward rest. Part 7. Chloroform. A pleasant scent before the darkness. A cool mist settles over the city as night turns into a pale morning, leaving the streets washed in a soft, bluish glow. The lamps have just been extinguished, their glass still holding a faint warmth. The air smells of damp stone, soot, and the faint sweetness of bakery bread drifting from an open doorway. In this quiet hour, you feel the Victorian world poised on the edge of transformation, a moment when fear and hope merge in the same shallow breath. For centuries, surgery meant agony. Now, a simple vapor promises to bring sleep instead of screams. You begin outside a hospital whose brick walls are darkened by years of smoke and rain. Inside, the corridors carry the scent of boiled linens, polished wood, and the faint metallic undertone of antiseptics just beginning to enter medical practice. Nurses move quietly between wards, their footsteps soft against the worn floorboards. Somewhere deeper in the building, a small group of doctors prepares for something that once felt impossible, an operation without pain. Chloroform sits in a small clear glass bottle on a tray beside a folded cloth. When opened, it releases a distinct fragrance, sweet, cool, almost comforting, with an edge that tingles in the nose like winter air. The scent floats above the metal instruments laid out neatly, a saw, a scalpel, clamps, silk threads. The tools catch the morning light and glimmer faintly, each one polished by hands accustomed to difficult work. A patient lies on the operating table, his breath tight with worry. The room feels hushed, as though every wall is listening. A physician dips the cloth into the chloroform and lifts it carefully, allowing a few drops to fall before folding it over itself. The cloth darkens, the scent strengthens. When he brings it close to the patient's face, the man hesitates for a heartbeat, then inhales. His eyelids flutter, his fingers loosen, his breath deepens. A soft quiet overtakes his features, like a tide spreading across a calm beach. The sweet vapor carries him into darkness that feels gentle rather than violent. Doctors exchange brief glances, a mixture of relief, fascination, and humility. They begin their work with steady hands. You step back and observe the atmosphere, the steady drip of water into a nearby basin, the hum of conversation between nurses, the rustle of linen skirts. The scent of chloroform lingers in the air, mixing with candle wax and cold metal. For the first time in medical history, a patient sleeps through the storm. Elsewhere in the city, chloroform enters everyday life in quieter ways. In private homes, wealthy families ask doctors to use it during difficult births. You enter a softly lit bedroom where a woman in labor grips the edge of a linen sheet. The room smells of lavender water, firewood, and the faint sweetness of chloroform rising from a cloth held near her nose. The midwife murmurs gently, guiding her through each contraction until the vapor softens her awareness, allowing the fear to drift to the edges. The household waits outside, pacing softly on carpeted floors. When the child finally cries, the tension dissolves like mist beneath sunlight. In parlors and drawing rooms, chloroform becomes a topic of fascination. Newspapers carry stories of miraculous operations, of pain removed as easily as blowing out a candle. You sit in a quiet salon where guests sip tea scented with bergamot. Their conversations drift like warm threads. A cousin had a tooth extracted in perfect calm. A neighbor avoided the horrors of amputation. A father survived a surgery that once meant certain suffering. The fireplace crackles softly, releasing a woody aroma into the room. Hope feels new, bright, tangible. Yet not everyone trusts the vapor. Some consider it unnaturally powerful. You visit a small chapel where a priest speaks gently to a grieving family. A loved one died unexpectedly under chloroform, an uncommon tragedy, but one that shakes the imagination. The air smells of incense and the cool stone of the sanctuary. The warning spread: take care, go slowly, trust, but with caution. Fear and wonder weave together like threads in a tapestry. Still, the world leans toward belief. Surgeons once haunted by the sound of patients crying out now describe a quiet transformation in their rooms. You step into another operating ward at dusk. The windows glow lavender, reflecting the fading sky. The surgeon holds the chloroform cloth with practiced ease. His movements are calm, almost reverent. The patient drifts into sleep as the lantern light trembles softly across the ceiling. Chloroform changes not only the practice of medicine, but the rhythm of care. Pain, once an unavoidable companion, becomes optional. The body, once braced for agony, can surrender. Surgeons, once afraid of prolonging procedures, begin to work with greater precision, their hands guided by concentration rather than urgency. You leave the hospital and walk into the evening. The fog has returned, pale and shimmering under the lamps. The city feels quieter, as though holding a collective sigh. A single bottle of vapor has softened centuries of suffering, carrying people into a gentle darkness where healing can begin. Part 8. Asylums and the Quiet Rooms of the Forgotten. A pale gray morning settles over the city, the kind where fog drifts low and slow across the ground, muffling footsteps and softening every edge of sound. The air is heavy with cold moisture, touched by the mingled scents of iron railings, wet leaves, and distant chimney smoke curling upward like faded memories. In this muted light, you walk toward a building that stands slightly apart from the rest of Victorian life, not by distance, but by mood. Its tall, solemn walls carry a quiet tension, as if it holds stories too fragile to speak loudly. The asylum rises before you like a fortress carved from stone. Ivy clings to its outer walls, wet from the morning rain. The windows are tall and narrow, framed by dark brick that seems to absorb the light rather than reflect it. A wrought iron gate creaks softly as you push it open, the metal cold beneath your fingers. Inside the courtyard, the grass is trimmed neatly, but the air feels still, untouched by the flutter of birds or the chatter of daily life. Even the breeze moves carefully here. You step through the main doors, and the smell of the asylum greets you, a blend of soap, damp wool, chalk dust, and a faint medicinal sharpness that lingers in the halls. The stone floor is cool beneath your steps. The corridor stretches long and straight, lined with plain wooden benches, gas sconces flickering with steady flames, and closed doors that conceal quiet struggles unfolding beyond them. Your footsteps echo gently, the sound flattened by the thick walls. A nurse passes by, her expression calm yet distant, as though carrying the weight of countless unseen stories. Her apron smells faintly of shaved soap and freshly boiled linen. She unlocks a door with a soft click, revealing a ward illuminated by weak morning light filtering through barred windows. Rows of beds line the room, each with a patient lying beneath tightly tucked blankets. Some stare at the ceiling, others clutch their hands together. A few sit upright, rocking gently as if following an internal rhythm the world cannot hear. In the far corner, a young woman hums a quiet melody under her breath. Her voice is soft, trembling slightly, and the tune repeats with the determination of someone clinging to a single thread in the dark. A nurse sits beside her, smoothing her hair and whispering reassurance. It is a tender scene, one that complicates the harsh reputation of asylums. Here, care exists, though imperfectly. Compassion flickers between shadows. As you move deeper into the building, you pass a treatment room used for moral therapy, the cornerstone of many Victorian institutions. The room smells of lavender water, worn leather, and the faint musk of old paper. Shelves hold books, meant to inspire calm or encourage focus, simple novels, hymnals, and instruction manuals. Patients are invited to read aloud, sew, paint, tend gardens, or complete puzzles, tasks believed to organize the mind, offering structure where chaos once lived. In another chamber, hydrotherapy unfolds. You hear the steady drip of water before you see the room, a soft, rhythmic tapping that echoes gently across the tiled floor. Here, patients are placed in warm baths meant to soothe agitation, or wrapped in cold, damp sheets to quiet overwhelming emotions. Steam rises from the surface of a large wooden tub, carrying the earthy scent of heated water and the faint sweetness of chamomile added by a thoughtful nurse. A patient sits immersed, eyes half closed, breathing in slow, deliberate patterns. The water holds him like a gentle parent. The corridors wind deeper into the asylum, where quiet rooms sit in stillness. These are spaces reserved for those overwhelmed by noise, light, or the intensity of their own thoughts. Inside one such room, the walls are padded with thick, canvas-covered cushions. The faint smell of straw lingers beneath the fabric. A single window near the ceiling allows a narrow sliver of daylight to spill inside, illuminating dust motes drifting slowly like tiny wandering stars. A patient sits in the corner, knees pulled close, breathing calmly. The silence here feels less like punishment and more like fragile protection. You continue walking until you reach a larger communal room. The walls are painted in soft colors, faded blues, warm creams, chosen to soothe rather than agitate. Patients sit at long tables where nurses guide them through tasks, sorting threads by color, arranging wooden tiles, folding cloth squares. The room hums with low, steady sound, the rustle of fabric, the scraping of chairs, the occasional sigh. A patient laughs softly when a tile slips through his fingers, and the nurse beside him smiles, steady and kind. Yet for all its gentle habits, the asylum carries a shadowed truth. The Victorian world often misunderstood mental illness, giving names like melancholia, hysteria, moral weakness, or nervous derangement to conditions that today have clearer language. Many patients enter the institution because their families feel overwhelmed, or because society has little space for those who cry too long, worry too deeply, or behave too differently. Some stay months, others stay years, a few never leave. You pass a small garden enclosed by high brick walls. Here, a group of patients walk slowly along gravel paths, supervised by attendants with watchful eyes. The air is cool, carrying the scent of damp soil and early blossoms. A robin hops along the edge of a bench, tilting its head curiously at the quiet figures. One woman kneels beside a patch of herbs, brushing her fingers across the leaves to release their fragrance. The scent of mint rises gently, bringing a hint of brightness into the muted space. Moments like this offer a glimmer of solace, small anchors in lives that feel unsteady. At the edge of the garden stands a tall oak tree, whose branches stretch wide like protective arms. A handful of patients sit beneath it on wooden chairs, wrapped in woolen shawls. They watch the sky, perhaps searching for something only they can see: the movement of clouds, the trembling of leaves, the distant memory of a freer world. The breeze carries the faint aroma of sun-warmed bark and the soft rustling of foliage. In this moment, the asylum feels almost peaceful. Evening approaches, and lanterns are lit along the corridors. Their warm glow softens the stone walls and brings a gentle warmth to the building. Nurses settle patients into their beds. Blankets rustle. Someone murmurs a prayer. Another sings a tune too quiet to decipher. The asylum at night becomes a world of whispers, a place where fragile minds seek rest, and where caretakers move gracefully through dimly lit rooms, offering water, comfort, and presence. The last light fades from the windows, and the building exhales a long, slow stillness. Inside these walls, countless lives move in quiet patterns, shaped by hope, fear, belief, misunderstanding, and the tender, imperfect desire to heal what cannot yet be named. Part 9. Patent Medicines and Traveling Miracle Sellers. A warm, amber haze settles across the late afternoon streets, the kind of glow that makes every storefront window shimmer and every brass door handle gleam. The air carries a mix of roasted chestnuts from a nearby vendor, horse sweat drying in the sun, and the faint mineral scent of freshly printed ink drifting from a newspaper stall. In this lively, noisy world, people search for simple answers to complicated pains, and Victorian entrepreneurs are more than willing to provide them. You walk along a bustling market road where the chatter of crowds blends with clinking coins and the distant rattle of carriage wheels. Posters line the brick walls on either side, their bold illustrations catching the eye. Bright bottles, glowing halos around smiling faces, miraculous transformations promised in swirling ribbons of text. Nervine, elixir for a restful mind. Fever tonic restores vital force. Ladies' friendly drops soothes all troubles of the heart. The claims are extravagant, embroidered with language meant to charm the weary soul. Some bottles contain herbs with mild effects. Others hold dangerous levels of alcohol, opium, coca extracts, or stimulants that lend temporary relief but uncertain outcomes. People buy them eagerly, not because they trust science, but because they trust hope. At a crowded stall, a traveling salesman stands atop a wooden crate, gesturing with animated confidence. His jacket shines with brass buttons. His boots are polished to a deep tobacco-brown gloss. He holds a bottle of glowing amber liquid, lifting it high so the warm light filters through it like honey. The crowd leans in. His voice carries the rhythm of theater, smooth, lilting, persuasive. This tonic, he announces, restores vigor to the limbs, clarity to the mind, and calm to the troubled heart. A single spoonful in the morning and another in the evening, and you shall feel renewed. His words sweep through the group like a gentle breeze. People nod. Someone steps forward with a coin already in hand. The bottle smells faintly of cloves, alcohol, and something sharper hiding beneath. You linger as a woman, dressed in a worn shawl, hesitates before buying a vial for her husband, who has been unable to sleep for weeks. She turns the bottle in her hands, reading the label as though hoping the truth will rise from the ink. At last, she presses the coin into the salesman's palm. His smile widens as she walks away, clutching her small glass hope. A few streets away, you pass a quieter shop with dusty windows and fading signage, remedies and curiosities. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of dried herbs, old paper and cedar shelves. Rows of patent medicines line the walls, each bottle adorned with delicate floral motifs or gilded lettering. Small boxes boast elaborate promises, pain-free mornings, peaceful digestion, glowing skin. The shopkeeper arranges them with care, believing genuinely in their power. Many Victorians don't see themselves as deceivers. They see themselves as offering comfort in a world where pain often has no clear solution. In one corner, you notice bottles labeled Mother's Quiet Syrup, a preparation marketed to soothe restless children. The name sounds gentle, like a lullaby whispered in a warm room. Yet inside the glass floats a mixture rich in opium and alcohol. Parents use it in good faith, desperate for moments of peace. The syrup smells sweet, with notes of anise and sugar, masking the shadows beneath. Continuing along the shelves, you find female tonic, a concoction promised to ease everything from menstrual cramps to anxiety and nervous weakness. It contains high-proof spirits and herbal extracts that warm the throat and relax the limbs. Women sip it in quiet corners of their homes, feeling the heat spread across their chests like a comforting hand. For a moment, the world softens. Even more curious are the cure-all elixirs, thick, dark liquids that boast abilities to treat nearly every ailment: indigestion, melancholy, insomnia, sore joints, weak heart, fatigue, and even spiritual malaise. The labels gleam in gold, depicting laurel wreaths, angels, and classical figures holding chalices of healing light. The artistry feels tender, almost earnest, as if the designers wanted to offer beauty alongside solace. You step back outside into the lively street, where a second traveling salesman has set up a portable booth beneath a fluttering striped canopy. This one wears a tall hat and carries a small wooden organ that plays a bright, cheerful melody. The tune draws people in, children first, then adults, then older couples, whose eyes light with cautious curiosity. The salesman holds up a tin of balm of the ages, promising vitality to the elderly. He offers free samples by dabbing the ointment onto wrists and temples. It smells of mint, eucalyptus, and earthy resin. The coolness tingles across the skin, producing a fleeting sensation of brightness. Some people smile. Others close their eyes, savoring the moment. Relief, even temporary, feels precious. As you wander further, the marketplace transforms into a quieter residential street. In a modest kitchen, lit by a single oil lamp, a father pours a small amount of tonic into a ceramic cup. The bottle reads, "Gentle night drops." The liquid inside glows with a soft amber hue. He stirs it carefully and takes a slow sip, letting the warmth spread through his tired limbs. The room smells of baked bread, cooling soup, and the faint medicinal scent of the tonic. His eyelids grow heavy, and his breathing deepens. The hope for a peaceful night is worth more to him than understanding its ingredients. In another home, a mother gives her elderly father a spoonful of liver-strengthening elixir. It tastes bitter, sharp, but leaves a comforting warmth behind. They sit beside the fireplace together, listening to the crackle of wood and watching shadows dance across the walls. Moments like these, gentle, intimate, deeply human, explain why patent medicines flourish. People seek comfort more than perfection. Even the wealthiest households participate in this world. You visit a luxurious parlor filled with velvet drapes and ornate wooden furniture. A silver tray holds several bottles of imported tonics, Swedish bitters, Indian nerve powders, German circulation stimulants. The aroma of incense mingles with the citrus scent of polished wood. Guests sip the tonics in small glasses as part of the evening ritual, believing they promote vitality. The line between medicine and indulgence blurs softly. Out on the streets, the sun dips behind the rooftops, casting the city in a slow, amber fade. Posters glow dimly in the twilight. Salesmen pack their crates, whistling softly as they prepare for another day of wandering. The marketplace quiets. Carrying their bottles home, people walk through the settling dusk with hope tucked inside their pockets, a fragile, glowing promise that perhaps tomorrow will hurt a little less. Part 10. The Cult of Hygiene and the Rise of Cleanliness. The morning begins with a soft, silver calm, the kind that drifts through lace curtains and settles gently on polished floors. A thin veil of mist clings to the garden walls, carrying the earthy scent of damp soil and newly opened leaves. Somewhere beyond the hedges, the distant clatter of a milk cart blends with bird song. In this cool, quiet hour, the Victorian world embraces a revolution that feels almost spiritual, the belief that cleanliness is not merely a habit, but a shield against sickness. You walk through a narrow residential street where laundry hangs between brick houses like pale flags rising with the breeze. Soap-scented steam escapes from windows as families boil linens in large copper pots. The smell of lye soap, lavender sachets, and drying wool lingers in the air. In these years, hygiene becomes a symbol of moral strength, an outward reflection of inward discipline. Cleanliness, Victorians believe, shows character. In one home, a mother scrubs a wooden table with vinegar water, her movements small but confident. She believes that polished surfaces and fresh air protect her children from unseen dangers. The windows are thrown wide, letting the morning wind sweep away stale scents. A vase of sprigs gathered from the garden stands on the windowsill, releasing the faint fragrance of mint and rosemary. She pauses only to wring out her cloth, listening to the gentle drip of water into the basin. Ventilation becomes a ritual. Across the city, people open windows even on cold days, allowing gusts of icy air to swirl through hallways and staircases. Curtains billow, dust motes dance, and lamplight glimmers against glass panes. To Victorian minds, fresh air carries a sense of purity, a cleansing force that banishes miasma and moral stagnation alike. It is comforting, bracing, and essential. Further along the street, you step into a public washhouse filled with soft echoes and warm steam. Women stand beside deep stone basins, scrubbing clothes with sturdy brushes worn smooth by years of use. Soap bubbles rise and burst in tiny flickers, scattering faint scents of pine tar, lemon oil, and chalky lather. A boiler roars in the back, heating water that spills into adjoining rooms where sheets hang from long wooden rods to dry. The atmosphere feels communal, rhythmic, almost ceremonial. These washhouses serve not only as places of labor, but as sanctuaries where cleanliness becomes a shared effort. Outside, you notice a physician making his rounds. His bag carries not only medicines, but advice. Open windows, sweep floors, boil water, wash hands, clean the air with herbs, whitewash walls to reflect more light. He speaks gently, believing deeply in the power of order and purity. Many doctors assign these tasks with the same seriousness as prescribing medicines. Hygiene begins to feel like a cure, slow, steady, and entirely within reach. In wealthier homes, hygiene rituals take on a refined elegance. You enter a townhouse where sunlight spills across polished marble floors. The air smells of beeswax, fresh linens, and the citrus tang of imported soap. A maid dusts the mantelpiece with a soft cloth, her motions deliberate and quiet. Upstairs, a lady of the house sits at her dressing table, brushing her hair with slow strokes, while a basin of rose water cools beside her. She dips a cloth into the fragrant water and wipes her hands, believing the scent refreshes her spirit as much as her skin. Bathrooms become coveted spaces, sanctuaries of porcelain, warm water, and privacy. You peek inside one such room where a clawfoot tub stands beneath a frosted window. The faint aroma of peppermint oil drifts from a bottle on the shelf. Steam gathers like a soft cloud above the surface of the bath. For many Victorians, this kind of indulgence is new, almost luxurious. Bathing shifts from occasional necessity to regular ritual, marking a cultural shift toward caring for the body as a daily practice rather than an occasional event. Even in humbler districts, people adopt hygiene habits with quiet pride. You step into a simple home where a father sharpens a bar of yellow soap with his knife to make smaller, easier to share pieces. The room smells faintly of tallow, boiled water, and the woody scent of worn floorboards. His children line up with eager faces, dipping their hands into a basin before drying them on a clean cloth. They laugh softly as the soap slips from their fingers. The moment feels tender. A family building safety together. Across the city, public health campaigns begin to emerge. Posters encourage hand washing, ventilation, and proper disposal of waste. Sanitary inspectors visit homes and businesses, checking drains, chimneys, and privies. The streets themselves begin to change. You walk along a boulevard where new sewage systems carry waste underground, replacing open gutters that once filled the air with foul odors. The improvement is subtle but profound. The city begins to breathe differently. In the evenings, lamplit parlors glow with quiet warmth. A family gathers around a fireplace, sipping tea and listening to the soft crackle of burning coal. The room smells of clean wool, polished wood, and the gentle sweetness of bergamot. Cleanliness becomes a comfort, a warmth of its own. Even the act of sweeping the hearth or airing out the room takes on an almost meditative quality, a way to shape order in a world filled with uncertainty. And beneath all these habits lies a deeper truth. Victorians long to feel safe. They want to believe that illness can be kept at bay through simple routines, that health is something earned through discipline and care. Cleanliness becomes a philosophy, a daily promise whispered through the scent of soap, the shine of polished brass, the flutter of curtains in fresh morning air. When night falls, the city glows softly behind drawn curtains. Beds are turned down, lamps dimmed, floors swept, windows cracked open to let the cool night breeze stir. Across thousands of households, the quiet rituals of hygiene become small acts of faith, weaving a thread of calm through every room. Part 11. Hospitals in Transition. From horror to hope, the morning breaks with a gentle, pearl-colored light, the kind that settles softly on stone walls and glass panes, making everything appear washed and quiet. A thin fog drifts across the hospital courtyard, gathering in delicate folds around iron railings and leafless trees. The air carries the scent of damp earth, boiled linens, and a faint trace of disinfectant. Not the sharp sting we know today, but an early, uncertain fragrance of something meant to purify. In this hour, the Victorian hospital stands between two worlds, one rooted in centuries of fear, and another reaching cautiously toward the future. You make your way up the steps of a large infirmary whose facade still bears soot from countless winters. Inside, dim corridors stretch like pale tunnels, lit by gas lamps whose flames tremble with every passing draft. The floors are stone, scrubbed until they shine faintly beneath the muted glow. A nurse walks past, her apron crisp, carrying a basin that releases a warm vapor smelling faintly of carbolic acid. A scent just beginning to creep into medical practice, bringing with it a quiet revolution. The ward you enter holds rows of beds arranged with careful symmetry. White linens lie smoothed and taut, each corner tucked with precision. The air feels cool, carrying subtle notes of iron from surgical tools, sawdust from recently mended floorboards, and the soft powdery scent of chalk used to mark patient charts. Patients lie beneath woolen blankets, their breaths rising and falling in slow rhythms. Some whisper to one another, their voices thin and tired. Others stare at the ceiling, lost in their own thoughts. A few sleep in uneasy silence. For centuries, hospitals were feared, places of chaos, infection, and sorrow. But now, whispers of antiseptic practice begin to move through these halls. You see a surgeon standing at a wash basin, sleeves rolled above the elbow. Water rushes over his hands, and he scrubs with unusual diligence, rubbing his knuckles, wrists, and palms as though following a ritual. Nearby rests a spray bottle filled with carbolic acid, the liquid shimmering almost pink in the light. When he pumps the trigger, a soft mist arcs into the air, releasing a sharp, medicinal scent that feels new, almost hopeful. This is the influence of Joseph Lister, slow to spread, often met with resistance, yet powerful enough to change the fate of countless patients. You sense the shift in the room. Nurses clean their instruments more carefully, wipe down surfaces with vinegar or weak acid solutions, and handle linens with greater precision. The atmosphere carries a tension of learning, adaptation, and hesitant optimism. Near the windows, you notice a nurse tending to a young woman recovering from surgery. The nurse's movements are gentle but methodical. She checks the patient's bandages, pausing to examine the edges where earlier wounds might have become infected. The patient smells faintly of lavender water and old cotton. Her eyes are half open, tracking the soft motion of the nurse's hands. She seems fragile, but no longer frightened. Change is happening not only in the instruments, but in the rhythms of care itself. At the far end of the ward, a small group of doctors examines a patient's chart. Their conversation floats across the room in low, thoughtful murmurs. They debate symptoms, note observations, and consider treatments with a seriousness that feels different from the old reliance on guesswork. The chart smells faintly of ink and paper dust. You see sketches, notes, and measurements, early attempts to understand illness through careful documentation rather than tradition alone. You continue into an adjoining room where surgical instruments are laid out on a table. The metal gleams beneath the lamplight, scalpels, forceps, clamps, and needle holders aligned with almost ceremonial order. Beside them sits a sterilizer, an early device warmed by flame, humming with quiet purpose. The scent of heated metal mixes with the faint sting of disinfectant, creating an atmosphere that feels strangely clean despite the weight of coming procedures. A surgeon enters, wearing a dark frock coat and an expression of solemn focus. He lifts a scalpel, turning it slowly between his fingers to inspect the edge. No surgical gloves exist yet, but the act of cleaning his hands and instruments signals progress. The room holds the calm before a storm. Quiet, heavy, charged with the hope that the tools of healing may finally outpace the dangers that lurk unseen. Later in the day, you walk through a recovery ward, bathed in soft, golden light from tall windows. Nurses carry trays of broth, sliced fruit, and herbal tea. The air smells warm and comforting, touched by the sweetness of apples and the earthy aroma of boiling water. A man with bandaged ribs sits upright, sipping his tea with trembling hands. A child rests with a warm compress on her forehead, breathing steadily as a nurse wipes her brow. These small rituals, soothing, nourishing, grounding, become as important as any medicine. Evening approaches, and the wards shift into a quieter rhythm. The lamps glow warmer now, their light settling like a blanket across the floors. Sheets rustle softly as patients move in their beds. Nurses walk slowly, checking pulses, adjusting pillows, smoothing blankets, and whispering reassurances. Every action carries intention. Every sound feels softened, as though the building itself understands the fragility it shelters. Outside the windows, the city darkens, and fog folds itself around the hospital like a gentle cloak. You stand near an entrance and watch as a nurse guides a young man up the steps, his clothes soaked with rain, his breath shallow, his eyes unfocused. She wraps a blanket around his shoulders and leads him inside. The warmth of the lamps greets him like a small miracle. In moments like this, you sense how hospitals begin to transform from places of dread into spaces of healing. The shift is slow, uneven, sometimes resisted. Yet within these walls, in the scent of carbolic mist, the glow of clean linens, the careful hands of nurses, a quiet hope takes root. A hope that the future may not erase pain, but soften it. That suffering may no longer be inevitable. That care, even imperfect, can evolve into something steady and kind. Part 12. Midwives, Women Healers, and the Quiet Hands of Care. The day opens with a pale gold glow slipping between rooftops, warming the cobblestones and softening the cool scent of morning fog. Smoke rises gently from kitchen chimneys, carrying hints of baking bread, damp firewood, and herbs hung to dry beside open windows. In these quiet domestic hours, away from the clamor of hospitals and lecture halls, a different realm of healing unfolds, one shaped not by polished metal tools or formal training, but by steady hands, whispered knowledge, and centuries of inherited wisdom. You enter a narrow lane lined with modest homes, their doors freshly washed and flanked by small window boxes full of thyme and marigold. Inside one of these homes, a midwife prepares her bag for the day. The scent of lavender water rises as she folds clean linen cloths, each piece soft from repeated washing. Her tools are simple: a pair of scissors, a wooden stethoscope, bundles of herbs wrapped in twine, and a small bottle of caraway oil. She moves with quiet certainty, her actions shaped by years of experience and the trust of the women she serves. A knock sounds at the door. She answers it quickly, slipping into her shawl as a young man explains that his wife is in labor. Without hesitation, the midwife steps into the brisk morning light. Her shoes tap steadily along the cobblestones, her bag swaying gently at her side. She knows every corner of this neighborhood, every family, every story, every door that opens in need of comfort. The home she enters smells of boiling water, clean linens, and the faint sweetness of chamomile tea simmering on the stove. A woman lies in bed, her brow damp, her breathing deliberate. The midwife kneels beside her, holding her hand with a steady, grounding warmth. Her presence transforms the room. The fear that lingers in the air begins to loosen, replaced by a gentle confidence that the process unfolding is ancient, natural, and held by experienced hands. She works with calm concentration, adjusting pillows, offering sips of warm tea, whispering encouragement, checking the baby's progress with delicate precision. Her movements are quiet but assured, guided by instinct and memory rather than textbooks. The scent of rosemary fills the room as she rubs the Mother S temples to ease her tension. When the time comes, she gives clear instructions, her voice low and steady. Breathe, push, hold on. Moments later, the cries of a newborn fill the air, sharp at first, then softening into tiny rhythmic breaths. The midwife wraps the child in a warm cloth and lays them against the mother's chest. The room now smells of wool, warm skin, and the faint metallic scent of birth. A deep calm settles over the family. For many Victorians, this is the purest form of healing, intimate, human, and woven into the fabric of daily life. Yet midwives are not alone in their quiet work. Across the countryside, women healers tend to their communities with herbal remedies passed down through generations. You walk along a country path lined with wildflowers and damp moss. The air smells of pine sap and cool winds sweeping across open fields. At the edge of the village stands a cottage covered in climbing roses. Inside, a healer prepares a tincture of elderflower and honey to treat a child's lingering cough. Her shelves hold jars of dried mint, yarrow, nettle, marjoram, and valerian root, each labeled in careful handwriting. Bundles of herbs hang from rafters, releasing a soft, earthy fragrance that fills the room. She crushes a handful of dried petals with a mortar and pestle, the sound rhythmic and grounding. Her remedies soothe stomach pains, ease fevers, calm sleepless minds, and mend sprains with poultices warmed over a small hearth. People come to her not because she performs miracles, but because she listens, truly listens, to their worries. In urban neighborhoods, women healers also tend to those who slip through society's cracks. You visit a cramped flat where a grandmother mixes a salve for her neighbor's joint pains. The room is warm, filled with the scents of beeswax, peppermint, and damp laundry drying near the fire. She heats a small tin over the flame, stirring the mixture until it melts into a golden liquid. Her hands move slowly, tenderly, shaped by a lifetime of caring for others. These women often know the histories of those they treat, the griefs that haunt them, the burdens they carry, the small joys that brighten their days. Healing, in their world, is not only physical. It is emotional, communal, and deeply woven into relationships. Their wisdom exists alongside formal medicine, sometimes quietly dismissed but always relied upon. You travel next to a larger town where midwives operate in partnership with physicians. Here, A midwifery school has begun to form, blending traditional knowledge with emerging scientific understanding. A classroom smells of ink, wool skirts, and fresh paper. Young women sit at wooden desks, taking notes on anatomy and hygiene, learning how to recognize danger signs during pregnancy. Their faces are bright with determination. They know their work saves lives, and they carry themselves with the calm dignity of those who hold fragile futures in their hands. You follow one of these students during her rounds. She visits a mother recovering from childbirth. The room smells of warm milk and freshly aired linens. She checks the mother's pulse, examines the baby's breathing, and gives gentle advice on rest and nourishment. The family listens carefully, grateful for her presence. In these small interactions, you witness the gradual merging of old and new forms of care, a fusion that reshapes Victorian life with quiet strength. As evening settles, you return to the city. Street lamps flicker awake, casting warm halos over narrow lanes. In many homes, midwives finish their work for the day, hanging their shawls by the hearth and warming their hands by the fire. In cottages and flats, women healers pack away their herbs, extinguish candles, and close their shutters against the night breeze. The air smells of cooling earth, chimney smoke, and lingering lavender from the day's work. Through all of it, the thread of care remains constant, a soft, steady weaving of compassion into every birth, every illness, every whisper of fear. These women move quietly through history, their contributions often overlooked, yet their hands steady countless lives. Part 13. The Shadow Workers, Nurses, Orderlies, and Apothecary Boys. Dawn arrives quietly, slipping like pale silk across the rooftops and touching the hospital windows with a soft, milky glow. The air outside is cool and faintly metallic, carrying hints of early coal fires and the earthy scent of streets washed clean by overnight rain. Inside the wards, the world stirs long before the city fully wakes. Lamps burn low, their flames trembling as night nurses finish their rounds. A sense of hushed continuity fills the corridors, the feeling that care has been unfolding all night, carried by hands that rarely rest. You step into a ward where a night nurse adjusts the blanket of an elderly man whose breathing is slow but steady. Her movements are gentle, shaped by exhaustion, yet guided by a commitment deeper than fatigue. The fabric of her uniform smells faintly of lavender water and starch. A tray beside her holds a tin cup, a folded cloth, and a bottle of diluted carbolic solution. She wipes the patient's forehead, smoothing away the sheen of fever with a tenderness that softens the hard edges of the room. This world belongs to the people who rarely appear in newspapers or medical journals, yet hold hospitals together. Nurses, orderlies, and young apothecary assistants who work behind the scenes. Their days begin before dawn and often stretch well into the night, marked not by glory, but by quiet routines that create the scaffolding of healing. You follow a nurse as she walks down a corridor lined with closed doors and lamps that cast long, gentle shadows. Her shoes make muted taps against the polished floor. She carries a small basket filled with bandages she folded earlier by lamplight. Each strip smells faintly of soap and cotton. As she enters the next ward, she begins checking pulses, taking temperatures with mercury thermometers, and adjusting pillows with careful precision. The patients wake slowly, drawn from sleep by the rustle of her uniform and the whisper of her footsteps. Nearby, an orderly moves between beds, collecting soiled linens and preparing fresh ones. His arms are strong from lifting patients, shifting mattresses, and carrying buckets of warm water. Sweat and steam cling to him in the warmer rooms, mixing with the earthy scent of damp fabric. He hums under his breath, not loudly, but enough to bring a faint sense of rhythm to his labor. In many hospitals, orderlies come from working-class families, bringing with them a practicality that anchors the chaos of illness. You follow him into the laundry room, where a heavy scent of boiling soap fills the warm air. Sheets and gowns soak in large tubs, their surfaces shimmering beneath the rising steam. Women scrubbed them tirelessly, their hands reddened by lye and constant contact with water. The sound of scrubbing brushes and wringing cloth forms a steady rhythm, a quiet orchestration of labor hidden behind the more dramatic work of doctors and surgeons. In the apothecary room, the morning light filters through tall windows, illuminating shelves lined with glass jars. The air smells of crushed herbs, chalk dust, and alcohol. Young assistants, often boys no older than 15, grind powders, dissolve tablets, label bottles, and measure ingredients according to handwritten lists. Their fingers are stained faintly with ink and plant dyes. They work quickly but carefully, knowing even a small mistake can alter a patient's fate. One boy lifts the lid of a jar filled with peppermint leaves. A burst of cool fragrance rises into the dim room. He grinds the leaves with a mortar and pestle, the rhythmic scraping echoing softly. Another boy measures laudanum drop by drop, his hand steady despite the weight of responsibility. Behind them, an older apothecary supervises with a calm, steady presence, offering guidance when needed, but allowing the boys to learn through repetition and focus. You wander deeper into the hospital and reach a stairwell where the scent shifts, cooler air carrying notes of stone, dust, and faint candle smoke from the chapel below. At the foot of the stairs, a nurse sits briefly on a wooden bench, rubbing her hands together to warm them. She closes her eyes for a moment, exhausted, yet holding herself with quiet resolve. Her hair is pinned back neatly, though a few strands escape, softened by the moisture of the early morning air. After a brief rest, she stands once more and returns to her work. In pediatric wards, nurses become gentle storytellers. You enter a small room where 3 children lie in beds arranged near a window that captures the pale morning sun. A nurse sits among them, reading softly from a book while holding a cup of broth for the smallest child. The room smells faintly of warm milk, chalk, and dried lavender tucked into the windowsill. The children listen with half-lidded eyes, their bodies relaxing as her voice drifts over them like a quiet lullaby. Not far from here, in the maternity ward, midwives and nurses work together. Their laughter, soft, restrained, echoes through the hall as they prepare warm towels and check on new mothers. The air smells of clean linens, damp wool shawls, and the faint sweetness of newborn skin. Nurses here learn to balance scientific tasks with the emotional needs of families, offering reassurance with every gentle word. You follow another orderly into a supply room where dust motes float in beams of morning light. He arranges jars of gauze, bottles of tincture, and rolls of bandages with practiced efficiency. The room feels organized and calm, a sanctuary of order that counterbalances the uncertainty outside its walls. The smell of dried oak from the wooden shelves mixes with the cool scent of glass bottles freshly washed. As the day progresses, the wards shift into a steadier rhythm. Meals are served, floors are swept, windows are cracked open to let in fresh air. Nurses jot notes in patient logs, their handwriting tidy but hurried. Orderlies carry bedpans discreetly, their faces composed. Apothecary boys deliver bottles of medicine wrapped in brown paper, their footsteps quick and light. You pause in a hallway where a nurse stands with a young man freshly admitted. She places a cool hand on his shoulder, offering comfort before guiding him to a bed. Her voice is steady, soothing, a counterpoint to the fear in his eyes. Here, in these small moments, the essence of care becomes most visible, the quiet acts that stitch humanity into a place meant for suffering. As the sun begins to lower, warm amber light spills through the high windows. Nurses move gracefully between patients, their faces softened by the glow. Orderlies finish their final rounds of the day. Apothecary boys arrange the last of the jars before closing up their workspace. The entire hospital settles into a slow, measured calm, like a great machine turning from the busy rhythm of day to the quieter pulse of evening. Through every corner, Every corridor, every ward, every small hidden room, the shadow workers carry their quiet devotion. They are the heartbeat of Victorian medicine, steady and understated, shaping healing from behind the scenes with hands that ask for nothing but a chance to help. Part 14, Science Awakens, Germ Theory and the Death of Old Beliefs. A soft gray dusk settles over the city, the kind that blurs rooftops and folds chimneys into a gentle silhouette. The air carries a cool, moist stillness touched by the faint aroma of rain-soaked stone, coal smoke drifting from evening hearths, and the metallic whisper of the river nearby. Lanterns begin to glow behind windows, their light trembling like small, determined stars. In this dim, thoughtful atmosphere, a quiet revolution begins to breathe, one that reshapes everything Victorians think they know about illness, purity, and the fragile machinery of the human body. You walk along a narrow street lined with shops and laboratories, their windows fogged from the day's experiments. Inside one, a young scientist arranges glass slides beneath a microscope. The room smells of alcohol, heated brass, and chalk dust. On his table rests a collection of tiny vials containing clear liquids that moments ago appeared empty to the naked eye. But through the lens, a hidden universe unfolds. Tiny organisms drifting like specks of starlight across a dark field. Their movements are erratic, purposeful, alive. Until this moment, the world has blamed illness on smell, imbalance, cold air, bad character, or moral weakness. Now, something unimaginable reveals itself. Sickness has a form. The scientist leans forward, breath held, studying the shapes that flicker into view. He adjusts the focus, watching the tiny bodies quiver, divide, and cluster. The discovery feels immense, too large to comprehend fully. The atmosphere in the room vibrates with possibility. Outside, a horse clops past on the cobblestones, the sound rounding softly against the thick walls. He barely hears it. His world has shrunk to the circle of glass through which an entire paradigm shifts. Across the city, surgeons begin to notice patterns in their wards. You enter a hospital where the smell of carbolic acid hangs faintly in the air, sharp and almost sweet. A surgeon examines two patients who receive similar operations. One recovers quickly under antiseptic practice. The other, treated in the old way, develops complications. The surgeon frowns, his mind turning over the possibilities. Infection is not random. It moves, behaves, responds. Something invisible governs it. This realization spreads like a cautious whisper. Nurses talk quietly in corridors, their breath forming small clouds in the cool air as they carry basins of warm water. Apothecaries adjust their mixtures, tidying their shelves with new reverence for cleanliness. Midwives boil their scissors longer. Orderlies begin washing their hands more often, the scent of soap lingering on their skin like a new badge of honor. A shift begins, subtle at first, like light changing behind a cloud. You enter a lecture hall where a group of physicians gathers, coats brushed clean, notebooks tucked under their arms. The hall smells of ink, wool, and faint pipe smoke left from an earlier gathering. On the stage, a professor stands before a chalkboard covered with sketches of bacteria. The drawings look almost decorative, swirling lines, clustered dots, delicate filaments. But his voice carries gravity. He speaks of transmission, contamination, sterilization, of how disease spreads through touch, tools, water, and breath. Some listeners nod in slow understanding. Others furrow their brows, skeptical. For them, abandoning old beliefs feels like stepping into an unfamiliar landscape. After the lecture, a small group gathers around a basin filled with instruments. A nurse demonstrates meticulous cleaning, washing each tool in boiling water, wiping with alcohol, drying them on fresh cloths. The metal catches the light in a way that feels almost ceremonial. The scent of heated steel and soap fills the room. In this moment, Hygiene becomes not just a marker of moral discipline, but a scientific necessity, a method, a safeguard. You follow a physician as he visits a family in a modest home. The room smells of soot, cooked barley, and clean laundry drying near the fire. He carries new instructions: boil drinking water, separate sick family members, wash bedding more frequently, keep hands clean before meals. The mother listens carefully, nodding with thoughtful resolve. These suggestions feel different from old advice, less mystical, more practical. She asks questions. He answers patiently. A new kind of trust forms between them, rooted in explanation rather than ritual. In laboratories across the country, more scientists peer into microscopes, their rooms filled with the scent of alcohol lamps and drying slides. The discovery of bacteria becomes a lantern held in the darkness, dim at first, flickering with uncertainty, but powerful enough to cast shadows of doubt on centuries of misconceptions. The miasma theory begins to fade, dissolving like mist under growing sunlight. You walk through a ward where nurses now clean the floors daily, letting the smell of fresh water and carbolic solution drift through open windows. Patients breathe easier, knowing that the air once feared as a carrier of illness is now simply air. A doctor washes his hands before examining a patient, the water turning warm beneath his touch. Such a simple act carries profound meaning. In another corner of the hospital, an older surgeon sits beside a window, watching rain gather in beads on the glass. His face is lined with years of experience. He remembers a time when operations were rushed, desperate, filled with fear. Now he sharpens his tools with a sense of calm focus, knowing the world has changed. Outside, rain taps softly on the stone sill. Inside, the air smells clean, almost hopeful. The city begins to reorganize itself around this new understanding. Drainage systems improve. Streets are paved more carefully. Water pumps are inspected. Homes adopt new cleaning routines. Schools teach basic hygiene. The very architecture of London shifts, adapting to the invisible truths newly uncovered. In laboratories, petri dishes glow faintly beneath lanterns, harboring colonies of bacteria that will one day transform medicine. Scientists observe them with reverence, aware that these tiny organisms carry answers long sought but never named. The rooms smell of warm glass, feathers of dust, and the faint acidic bite of disinfectant. Evening settles again, the city dimming into a patchwork of lamplight and fog. The world feels different, tentatively clearer, quietly wiser. Germ theory does not erase suffering, but it illuminates the path forward, a path of precision, cleanliness, and understanding, a path where guesses become knowledge and rituals give way to reason. Through the soft hush of night, you sense the Victorian world stepping gently from old ways into new light, guided by discoveries too small to see yet powerful enough to reshape the future. Part 15. Lanterns extinguished. The Victorian era fades. A cool twilight settles over the city, the kind that gathers softly in the folds of narrow streets and lingers on the surfaces of old stone buildings. The last glow of the sun slips behind the chimneys, leaving the sky washed in violet and pale rose. Lamps begin to flicker awake in windows and along the roads, their warm halos trembling in the gathering dusk. The air smells faintly of drying leaves, distant hearth smoke, and the lingering sweetness of coal tar. In this hour between day and night, the Victorian world begins to fold itself into memory. You walk along a quiet lane where gas lamps cast long shadows across the cobblestones. The city feels gentler now, touched by a reflective stillness. Behind these windows, people settle into the rhythms of evening. A midwife returns home after a long day, her shawl trailing faintly the scent of lavender and chamomile. A nurse places her tired hands into warm water, washing away the faint bite of carbolic acid. In an apothecary shop, An assistant straightens jars that now hold fewer mysteries than they once did. Each figure carries the weight of a century in transition. Victorian medicine, with all its curious remedies, rituals, hopes, and fears, draws its final, measured breath. You pass a row of houses where the smell of supper drifts into the evening air. Warm broth, fresh bread, the earthy sweetness of root vegetables simmering in iron pots. Inside one home, a mother opens a window to let fresh air in, unaware that the ideas guiding her simple gesture were once considered radical. In another, a father lights a lamp beside a neat stack of clean linens, ready for a child who has struggled with a lingering cough. Hygiene, once a moral duty, now finds grounding in science. A few streets away, the last glow of a laboratory lamp spills onto the pavement. Inside, a young scientist sets down his notes with quiet satisfaction. The glass slides he studied earlier, each holding tiny forms that would have been dismissed only decades ago, now shape the future of medicine. The air inside the room smells of alcohol, warm metal, and freshly extinguished flame. The world he sees through the microscope is not the one his parents knew. It is clearer, sharper, filled with new dangers and new possibilities. You continue on, drawn toward a hospital where evening rounds unfold beneath the soft hum of lantern light. Nurses move gracefully through the wards, adjusting pillows, checking bandages, whispering comfort to those who struggle to sleep. Their uniforms carry the faint scent of starch and clean cotton. The floors, once gritty with dust and fear, now shine faintly from daily scrubbing. The atmosphere hums with a steady calm, not free of suffering, but softened by a rising trust in method and care. A surgeon stands at a wash basin, sleeves rolled gently above his elbows. The water runs warm over his hands. He scrubs with deliberate care, reflecting on the years behind him, the era of guesswork and instinct, the nights lit only by candle flames, the harsh scent of bleeding rooms and unwashed cloth. The basin smells faintly of soap and iron. Behind him, on a polished tray, his instruments gleam under the lantern's glow. He lifts one and examines the reflection in its surface as if searching for the distance traveled between two worlds. Even the asylums change in the fading years of the century. You return to one of their courtyards, where the evening air vibrates softly with the hum of insects. The tall walls remain, but new ideas circulate within them: humane treatment, structured days, gentle routines. A patient sits beneath a budding tree, hands clasped loosely, breathing in the cool night air. A nurse adjusts a shawl around his shoulders. The scent of damp grass rises around them. The building is still a place of sorrow, but now also of compassion, shaped by countless small efforts to understand minds once thought unreachable. You follow a cobblestone path that leads toward the river. The water moves slowly tonight, carrying reflections of lamps that tremble like drifting gold. The riverbank smells of algae, cool stone, and distant bakeries closing for the evening. You pause, letting the wind brush against your cheek. It carries the faintest echoes of the Victorian era. The clip of hooves, the rustle of crinolines, the steady whisper of a midwife's voice, the rattle of bottles in an apothecary's crate. And somewhere far behind you, in parlor rooms, in crowded flats, in quiet farms, the last lanterns of the century flicker softly, preparing to dim. The world they illuminated was filled with contradictions, tenderness and misunderstanding, ingenuity and superstition, cruelty and care. The strange treatments that once guided medicine now stand like old signposts pointing toward a future the Victorians could only imagine. As night deepens, you walk home through the soft glow of lamplight, carrying with you the stories of those who lived, healed, suffered, and endured in this complex age. Their world was imperfect, sometimes unsettling, often bewildering, yet beneath all of it ran a simple, resilient thread: the human desire to ease pain, to comfort the sick, to offer hope when darkness grows near. If you enjoyed drifting through this quiet chapter of history Feel free to like the video, or simply let your mind rest as you fade into sleep. And if calm journeys like this bring you comfort, you're welcome to subscribe whenever the moment feels right. The world remembers you.